Welcome everybody to this session on the single market program. This is the program that will replace the current Smes program, focusing on SMEs, as you may know. My name is Jens. I'm a special advisor in the Danish Business Authority. One of my tasks here is to follow the Smes program. I'm a member of the EU Smes Committee, and one of my other tasks is to negotiate this single market program that you will hear some more about now. So yeah, the next slide I will show you the agenda for the session, and hopefully you will get wiser on the content of the program and how to apply for it. So first I will say that this is a recorded session. So we are recording it online because I'm placed in Copenhagen and Ben, the other speaker, is placed in Sweden, so we can't meet physically. But this is an online recording. However, Ben and myself will also be online when you see it, and we will be able to chat with you live. So there is a chat function, and please feel free to ask questions during the session. And then we will answer them in the end. So that's why we have the Q&A point as point number 3 on the agenda. But before we get to that, I will give you a presentation on the background and the expected content of the single market program. And after that, Ben Jorgensen from Sustainable Business Hub will give you some good case examples on some projects that he is part of. This is in the Smes program, and they're called EC2I, which is one of the projects, and the other project is called TechBridge. Yes. Next slide, please. So first I will tell you a bit about the single market program. And next slide. As mentioned, and as many of you perhaps know already, the Smes program is the current EU program for the competitiveness of small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs. And the single market program is a successor to the Smes program. However, the single market program does not only concern the SME element. The new program brings together several currently independent programs on different areas in the EU budget. And all these areas are in a wide sense connected to the single market, so that's why it's called the single market program. And besides the SME actions, this concerns statistics, consumer affairs, and the food chain, which is animal and plant health. So it's a wide conception of the single market. But the reason for that is it's a general ambition from the European Commission on having fewer programs in the whole budget. So that's why they have put these together. But I won't go any further into these other elements. It's just so you know the background, because the focus today is on the SME element in the program. So that's what we are focusing on. The proposed budget for the program, for the whole program, was 4.1 billion for the whole period of 7 years, from 2021 to 27. And here 1 billion euros was put off for the SME objective in the program. So that's that was the proposal. But as I've also written there, the negotiations are not finished yet. And as you also probably know, the big negotiations on the big budget are not finished yet either. And there's a connection between why they are not finished. Well, the negotiations are not finished. The Commission presented their proposal in June 2018, together with all other proposals in the MFF, the multi-annual financial framework, as you call it, the big budget. And then Council found a position, the member states, pretty fastly in November 2018, I think it was. And shortly after that, the European Parliament had their position as well. That was in February 2019. However, that was pretty shortly before the General Parliament election. So the negotiations between Council and the Parliament and the Commission didn't get up and running before after the elections in the fall of 2019. And even when they started, they broke down quite quickly because you weren't able to discuss the size of the budget in the program, because that is part of the big, broad, general multi-annual financial framework negotiations, and the Parliament wouldn't accept that, and yeah, so there was a freeze in the negotiations until pretty much this summer, where, as you may know, the member states made an agreement on the big budget with our heads of state in Brussels for 4 days. And after that, we have been negotiating once again with Parliament. So so the trilogues have been resumed, but as you know, and that's, well, you can't see the slide, but we still don't know if the negotiations will be finished before the end of the year, but we certainly hope they will, so that the program can get up and running in 2021 when it's supposed to start. Yes, so I think that is it. And next slide, please. So if so that was some background for you, maybe a lot, but it's good to know. And if we then dive into the SME element in the single market program, well, I mean, in broad terms, we don't expect major changes compared to the current customer program in the content of the program, and that is, well, not completely true, because, as I've also written there, a large part of the current customer program, actually around 60% of the budget for it, concerns access to finance for SMEs. And this element will still be part of the big budget, but it is moved to another program called Invest EU, which is a general EU investment program. So the access to finance part of the customer program will not be part of the single market program. But that, I mean, it won't. I don't think that will matter much to you listening here. So the expected content of the element, I mean, the continuation of the customer program also means that some of the big posts in this program is expected to continue in the single market program, and I've called them fixed costs here in lack of a better term, but that's because they're expected to run through the whole period of the program for the whole 7 years. And that is, for example, the Enterprise Europe network, which is a large support network for SMEs based in all the EU states and also in some third countries. And yeah, perhaps some of the Danish representatives of the EEN, as you call it, are listening here. I know that they're part of the conference, at least. So so that is one budget post. Another one is the Erasmus for Young Entrepreneurs program, which is a cross-border exchange program for new or aspiring entrepreneurs. Kind of like many of you perhaps know Erasmus for students. So this is just an Erasmus for entrepreneurs. But besides these fixed costs, there will also be announced calls for projects during the program period, just as it's the case today in the COSME program. And this is what I believe is the most interesting part for you guys listening here today. And that's because that is where many of you will have opportunities for submitting applications for these projects. And that's also what Ben will tell you a bit about in a few minutes. So I've just written a couple of examples from the latest COSME program on these projects, but I would like to underline that there's quite a wide range of projects announced during the program period. There definitely will be. So, but one example is, for example, a call on innovation and uptake and digitalization in the tourism sector. Tourism is something that some countries are very focused on, and especially in the more southern part of Europe, where they have lots of tourists. So that's action areas in the program, and it will be as well in the new program. So this is an action that is supposed to provide support to tourism SMEs and startups, and capacity building in these SMEs, and give them some training and coaching, technical assistance for digitalization and awareness raising. So it's not groundbreaking, but it's probably helpful for definitely for those SMEs who are attending it. The other example I've written is this Clusters Go International initiative, and Ben will tell you more about that, because these projects are part of this. But I mean, that is the objective of this initiative is to support actions establishing, new European strategic clusters and partnerships on international areas. Yes, so these project proposals, that's what's pretty interesting for you, I believe. And is everything going to be the same as in the COSME program? Well, no, of course not. As mentioned, and as a disclaimer, the negotiations are not finished yet, so we don't know it for sure. But I'm very certain that there will be more focus on some of the also big political issues in these days, especially on the sustainability agenda and digitalization. And this is, of course, a good thing from a Danish perspective, because that's areas where we already have a strong position, and also where we see a lot of new business opportunities. So this is a positive thing in the new program as well, I believe, and can be for you. Okay, next slide. So how do you get involved, and how do you get to apply for some of these projects? Well, the program is implemented by the Commission. It's called Erasmus, which is the Agency for SMEs, Executive Agency for SMEs, I believe it stands for. So everything regarding announcement of calls and the proposals and the judgments of the applications and this kind of stuff, they take care of that. So I mean, that's out of our hands in the national authorities. But what we can do is we can give you an idea as soon as possible on what's in the pipeline for the program. And here there's going to be made annual work programs for the budget. And I mean, the drafts for these work programs can give you some kind of insight to what is coming up, and also perhaps possibility to say, okay, this sounds interesting, or this doesn't sound interesting to me. Yeah, and there will also be timelines on when they will be proposed and that kind of stuff. So it can make it easier for you if you want to make an application to know when you are supposed to put in your work. Yes, and as mentioned way in the beginning, I mean, we are represented in the committee, the EU committee, with all the member states where we adopt these working programs. So, and we very much hope that there will be such a committee as well in the new program. That's one of the issues in the remaining negotiations, but I believe that will be the case, because then I have the possibility of sharing this information with you if you are interested in it. And the way we do that is it's quite basic. We have a Danish reference group for the COSME program, and we will have the same for the single market program. And it's basically a mailing list. Where I will send you out the proposed work programs and other relevant information mostly for your information. You're also welcome to comment on it and on the different initiatives. So that is, I mean, I think that's a useful tool for you to use if you're interested in the program. And I've written my mail here. So you're very welcome to write to me if you want to be part of this reference group. And I promise you won't get spammed or anything. I mean, you can count it on one hand how many mails that will be sent during a year. It's not a lot, but I mean, I think it works pretty okay. Of course, you're also welcome to write to me or call me or anything if you have other specific questions. Sometimes I have some context in the commission who can help with if you don't know when a call will be, if it has been delayed or anything. That has especially been the case here in the COVID-19 period. There has been some delays in the calls, and people haven't really known when it will be, and then I can talk to the commission, and they are pretty nice to tell me how much they know about when the calls will come. So that's an example of how I can help you as well. Yes, I believe that is it for now. We will get over to Ben Jørgensen from Sustainable Business Hub, and he will give you a couple of good case examples.
Thank you, Jens. My name is Ben Jørgensen. I'm a project manager at Sustainable Business Hub, and we are a clean tech cluster based in Malmö, Sweden. So I'm going to share with you my experience working with two initiatives that were financed by the COSME program as part of the Clusters Go International call. So you've already given some background, but I have maybe a few more words to say on that topic. So this is one of the few central EU programs that directly targets clusters, which makes it, of course, very interesting for all of us. The aims of this particular call, Clusters Go International, are to help clusters develop a joint internationalization strategy as a group, to develop strategic partnerships with stakeholders in non-EU markets, whether that's other clusters or incubators or similar organizations. Clusters are not necessarily as big outside of the EU as within the EU, cluster organizations at least. And of course, the program also aims to help groups of clusters within the EU to develop joint internationalization support services for their members, especially the SMEs. So these expected results of this call are partnerships in the third markets, so markets outside of Europe, but most importantly, business collaboration agreements between European SMEs and stakeholders in third markets. So that can be commercial contracts. It can also be research collaborations. It's really open to a wide range of agreements, but that is the main goal, to help SMEs internationalize. So as I said, I have experience with two initiatives financed under the COSME program. The first was EC2I that ran from 2017 to 2019. That was a consortium of 5 clusters. So in addition to us, Sustainable Business Hub in Sweden, we had partners in France, Austria, and Belgium, and it was led by Clean here in Denmark, the Danish Cleantech Cluster for Environmental Technology. And we targeted China and the US. And we were quite happy with that project, although we did learn a lot. So we got 6 business collaboration agreements between SMEs that were part of our consortium and partners in the US and China. And those ranged from joint ventures to demonstration projects, so quite broad. The second initiative that I'm involved with now actually just started in September and will run until the end of, run until 2022. And in this initiative, we also have 5 partners. So in addition to ourselves, we have cluster partners in the Netherlands, in Northern Italy, in Spain, and again, Clean in Denmark. And in this second initiative, we've adjusted our focus a little bit based on our experiences from the first. And so rather than targeting China, we've added Canada to the mix. So we're focusing on the US and Canada with a thematic focus on energy and water technologies. So the application process, well, first I would say we had some experience already with the application process because we had applied to a similar call previously, which we did not get, but still gave us valuable experience. So actually, I would say that's one thing to think about right away. If you do not make it, try to think of it as a learning process, because these are very competitive calls. And just because you don't make it one year doesn't mean you won't make it the next year. You can learn a lot just from the application process. It's very important to have a good partnership network, though. I would say that was one of our biggest advantages. So Sustainable Business Hub and Clean are both members of the International Cleantech Network, which is a strategic partnership of 16 clusters, mostly in Europe, but also in North America and Africa. The secretariat is actually hosted by Clean in Copenhagen, which is, of course, great for both of us. And having that international partner network is very important, because otherwise you have to find new partners for every call. And it's really important to develop trust, to get to know each other very well. It really helps the entire process quite a bit. In the writing process, it's also very important to develop a good division of labor and to make sure that every partner really has a task they're responsible for and to feel ownership of that task. That makes your life easier as a coordinator, because otherwise you're doing everything yourself. But it's also really important because that way everybody really feels that their input is included in the project plan and so on. It's not so great if later on partners say, well, I wasn't involved with this, I'm not happy. That's not something you would like to happen. So make sure everybody is involved in the writing process and really feels ownership. So it's a joint project, it's not just one partner. In the implementation, I would say to do as much as you can digitally. So because the goal of this call is to help SMEs internationalize, a big focus of the activities is also related to that. So there is a lot of international travel and organizing international matchmaking, for example, to help SMEs engage with potential partners. The first time around in the EC2I project, we may have gone international physically too soon. And we realized actually that there's quite a lot you can do digitally. So it's actually better to have the first and maybe second and even third meetings digitally, so that by the time you actually get around to going to the US and China, you're really ready to get to work. That kind of trip is expensive. It takes a lot of time, and you really want to make sure that you're only investing that time when you have a good idea that there will be a good outcome. I would also say, really understand your grant agreement. It's a very bureaucratic document, and it can be a little bit frustrating to work with, but if you understand your grant agreement, you can really be flexible in interpreting what you've written. So you will, of course, describe a group of activities in the application process, and that will be the framework for implementing the project. But there is still quite a bit of flexibility. You can change things you've written in the project. You can interpret some activities differently. So know your grant agreement and develop a good relationship with the project officer. They are there to help you, and they want you to have a good result. They want the SMEs to develop good partnerships, so they're your friend. And that brings us to another very important point. Really make sure you prioritize impact on the SMEs. You have all kinds of KPIs and indicators in the project. They are not all equally important. The most important thing is that the SMEs develop business partnerships or research collaborations. So really keep that front and center. I would say, quality over quantity. If you have 100 matchmaking meetings, but they are not really that great, it's not a good result, even if you've hit your KPIs for the number of meetings. If you have 30 meetings instead of 100, but they result in some kind of concrete project for the SMEs, that of course is much more important. And that seems very obvious maybe, but it can be easy to get distracted by all these other KPIs and indicators that you have in front of you when you're reporting to the commission. I would also say that, especially when you're dealing with other English-speaking countries, really try to understand the way they talk about things. English is my first language, and I found it challenging myself. We have a lot of terminology we use here in Europe when we talk about business development, innovation, SMEs, and clusters. That's just very different from North America. And if you don't keep that in mind when you engage with potential partners, it can get a bit confusing. So really try to understand what they're talking about and try to understand what you're talking about and make sure you're speaking the same language. Again, maybe that's obvious, but it's something I think is really important to keep in mind. One final thing is also very important, follow-up. So I think a lot of the time when we work with SMEs, we assume that we will organize a meeting for them with a really interesting partner, and from there on, it's their responsibility, and they will get right to business and make sure that something happens. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. SMEs need a lot of help in moving things forward. They also have a lot of different things competing for their attention. It really helps if you stay engaged in the whole process after organizing meetings, for example. Make sure that you follow up, ask them what the status is, really push them. Because what you want, of course, is to go from a meeting to something more concrete, some kind of collaboration agreement. So some general tips that I would say that come from my experience with this program. It's really important to have a strong network of international partners and a network that survives one project, for example. I'm sure if you work with European projects, you have great partners for 3 years, the funding ends, and then everybody moves along. Ideally, you can build on that, but it can be hard to keep everybody together and keep that collaboration potential alive. So in our case, we have the International Clean Tech Network, and that's actually something that it's a membership-based organization that we finance through membership fees. I found that to be a very valuable model, not just for the COSME program, but for all kinds of other European funding opportunities and just business collaboration beyond public funding. I would really recommend that clusters and stakeholders in other fields look into developing this kind of network because it's really, really valuable for us. As I said before, make sure that all the partners are engaged in all of the activities. Of course, some will be leading some work packages, and so they will be more engaged in some tasks than others. Make sure everybody feels that this is their project. You don't want a passive partner who's just sitting there, not really contributing. As I said, know your grant agreement. It really saves you a lot of trouble if you understand what the European Commission is looking at when they're evaluating you. You don't want to get into a situation where you forgot to implement some kind of activity because you didn't think it was so important in the end. It's important to know your grant agreement. That will lay out your legal obligations to the Commission. And I know it seems very bureaucratic. That's been my experience, but it is worth it. Know the grant agreement. And finally, as I said, prioritize impact, focus on quality and not quantity when it comes to organizing support activities for the SMEs. Just keep that front and center. Even if that means you will not hit all of the other KPIs you may have specified in the application, if you can deliver results, concrete results, that is how you create value for your members, for the SMEs, and also how you make the Commission happy. So that's, I think, important to keep in mind. And that's all I have. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Ben. It's very interesting presentation, and really nice to get an idea of how things are happening out in the real world. And some very good points, I believe, also for the other listeners here thinking about perhaps applying for a program. As you mentioned, you firstly had a project that wasn't that didn't turn out to be anything, and what I'm just interested in, what would you say would be your biggest learning point, or what you could say between the first and the second, and perhaps also the third project in how to make the applications? What was the difference that made them go through the next times?
So in terms of what made it a successful application in terms of the evaluation, it's really hard to say. You don't have the same evaluators across different applications. The European Commission has a pool of evaluators that they draw on, and they will not be consistent necessarily between applications. So it can be frustrating when you have one application, they really loved some elements, and in the next application you kind of try to include those elements again, and they say, oh, well, we don't like that. That can happen.
Oh, yeah.
So it's hard for me to say, because of that, what made one application better than the other. But what I would say is that the fact that we'd worked with these partners before was very valuable. We knew each other. It was much easier to really get down to business, I think, because we could be very honest with each other. We also we have a lot of valuable experiences, and when you know each other, it's much easier to share that and to understand the context and so on. So that's all been very valuable, I would say.
All right, but that's also a very good point. I mean, that's don't let it throw you back if one part of or if one evaluator doesn't like your project because perhaps it's not the same next time. I think that's a very good point.
I would say,
also,
sorry, go ahead.
No, just go ahead.
One interesting example of that is actually something that we improved from the EC2I project to the Tech Bridge, or so we thought. So we shifted a lot of resources to follow up, so that we had a kind of a longer process. So not just a matchmaking meeting, but one initial meeting followed by a follow-up meeting, followed by even another follow-up meeting with the consortium really monitoring the entire process and being involved in that. That was from my perspective, that's a really big improvement. But actually, it didn't seem like the evaluators appreciated that improvement that much.
Okay.
So just, keep that in mind.
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting to hear about your cooperation with both well, maybe that's not so much cooperation with the evaluators, but also with the project managers in the commission. And I mean, is it as bureaucratic as you fear, or can you elaborate a bit more about the cooperation with the people in the commission that you have had?
Sure. So there are a few things to consider. First, if you've had experience with some of the regional European programs, you might be very afraid of the bureaucracy. The central programs are actually a little bit better. It's a big difference. I found the COSME program had a much lower bureaucratic burden. The reporting was smoother. The financial process was a lot easier, a lot more quick. So that part is good. The collaboration with the project officers can also be good if you try to understand each other and develop a collaborative relationship. There is also, of course, a lot of back office stuff that I don't really have a good perspective on, because I only talk to my project officer, and there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that I just don't know about.
Yeah. Sure. But it's good to know and hear about that as well, because I mean, the commission can be kind of a black box for many people, but I mean, it doesn't necessarily. I mean, you can still talk to them usually. It's also my experience as well. So do that. That's very good to hear. And then perhaps one last question. I mean, with the EC2Y, it's finished now. So I'm just thinking, what's the thing that you're most proud of in this project? And what was the biggest success of that project?
We developed a really good partner network in the target markets, actually, which is, of course, one of the key goals of the call. And of course, you don't collaborate for the sake of collaborating. We collaborate with them because it generates business opportunities. And so I've talked already about some of the results we got within the project, but those partnerships have stayed alive beyond the end of the European funding. And it's just, we have really good contacts now in the US that we've been able to use to give our members, give SMEs access to some really interesting business opportunities.
Oh. Well, that's great to hear. More business for the European SMEs. You can't be sad about that, especially not if you're me sitting in the Danish Business Authority. So, well, thank you very much, Ben, for this presentation and answering the questions. I think it was really giving. Yes, I think that concludes pretty much the recorded session here on the single market program. But as mentioned in the beginning, before, we will answer you on your chat questions live for the rest of the session. So please feel free to write a question or anything, and both Ben and myself are here. So it's if you have any questions, please post them, and otherwise you are of course more than welcome to contact me again if you have other questions. So thank you very much, and thank you, Ben, and I'll see you on the chat.